Evangelicals have no shortage of advice about becoming a good listener. It's one of their main evangelism strategies, after all. But they can never actually do it. Today, we will explore why. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today is Tuesday, June 30th, 2026. This is Roll to Disbelieve, and I'm Captain Cassidy. Thank you for joining me. It's been a gorgeous week where I live. Rainy, cloudy, high 60s. That's Fahrenheit for the people that don't use freedom units. It's kind of chilly for mid-June, and I couldn't be happier. I'm not a fan of bright sunlight. It hurts my eyes very much. Yeah, you'll always be able to spot me in a crowd. I will be the one in sunglasses, regardless of the weather. And this weather has had me on a shortcake tear with baking, because local raspberries are in season, and nothing is nicer than raspberry shortcake. Oh, speaking of which, you want to hear something cool? If you've heard of the baking ingredient called shortening, it came along way after the idea of short dough. Short dough is flour with fat cut into it. It tears easily, and it doesn't hold together like a risen dough would. You can see the word short used this way in phrases like short-tempered and short on cash. You lose your temper easily. Your cash supply has run out unexpectedly. So for almost 1,000 years, medieval bakers have been using the term short dough to describe that kind of dough. And about 25 years ago, I got way into medieval and Renaissance cooking, right? And so I was seeing short dough as a descriptor all the time. And I was like, but why aren't they talking about shortening? Well, because they were using named animal fats like butter and lard. Solid fats back then were mostly animal fats. It wasn't until the late 1800s that someone came out with something called shortening. And they did it because it wasn't a traditional fat that was being used. It was plant-based oils made solid through some kind of technology. Oh, if you hadn't noticed, I'm a fiend for food history, and today's topic is kind of related. It's like noticing medieval recipes that said an odd thing, but omitted the natural counterpart to that thing. What we're talking about tonight is the evangelical Achilles heel, listening. Before we get going on that topic, I would like to thank my patrons and supporters. You make my work possible. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. If you would like to become one of them, I welcome your support as well. Please check out the links at the end of today's write-up. It'll be on Patreon under Roll to Disbelieve, one word, or at our official website, rolltodisbelieve.com. I have options there for one-time gifts and longer-term support, and I appreciate whatever you decide to do. And now, our situation report. Being a good listener for successful soul winning. For many decades, evangelicals have advised the flocks to become good listeners. They push good listening as an essential skill in evangelism. Their leaders tell them that without truly hearing and validating a target's thoughts, they, as evangelists, cannot hope to convert anyone. Through Jesus' infilling spirit, they can become the master listeners that he wants them to be. As a writer with Grace Church puts it, when we listen, we communicate the gospel. Oh, do we? However, the flocks clearly don't have this skill. They lack it utterly. Everyone takes it as given that in evangelicalism, nobody actually practices the skill of active listening, or even knows how to do it. Advice about becoming a good listener, oh yeah, it's thick in the sheepfold, along with admonitions of what will happen if the flocks don't do it. And yet, the flocks keep not doing it. They consistently lack this essential skill. I mean, at least judging by the sheer volume of advice out there about it. Ironically, one Calvinist website that we'll talk about at the end here accidentally reveals exactly why evangelicals cannot become good listeners. Active listening, at least when it involves real people, has three components that their tribe cannot ever possibly condone in themselves. When they actually listen to people, they learn that their beliefs aren't as universally necessary or even as universally good as they might have thought. Today, here, we will explore the world of good listening. We'll see what evangelical leaders make of it, and then we'll see why they cannot possibly ever do it. Listening is a skill that was really never well practiced enough to be called dying now. The other day in voice chat on one of my Discord servers, someone mentioned that they were learning not to interrupt others as a life skill. Everyone else in the chat immediately chimed in that we'd all had to learn the same thing, and one person noted that we had sort of, without talking about it, tacitly adopted certain mannerisms that helped stop us from interrupting each other. Until that moment, I had not quite realized that we had all kind of adopted those habits. But then again, it doesn't always come naturally to people to listen well. 30 years ago, I stood in a friend's kitchen while helping her with dinner. While steam rose around us in the chilly evening air, she said that she liked one of our friends because when she talked to him, she could tell he wasn't just waiting quietly for her to stop talking so he could dive in with his own stories. She liked him because of that. And 20 years ago, I was in training for a complicated customer service job. Part of that training had me sitting with an experienced agent and just listening to her take calls. One of those calls was from a woman who needed to cancel service because the user of that service was her son, and he was in the military, and he was getting deployed overseas. Chances were good he was going to see combat. The mother was very upset and worried. She kept throwing out all these hints about her feelings. She was dying to talk about this. But the agent didn't notice at all. Listening to that exchange, it drove me spar. Of course, I was set up in a way that I couldn't say anything at all. I wasn't about to tell the agent how to do her job. And yet, every cell in my body was screaming to take that mother's offered hand and just listen to her for a little while. Let her talk about how worried she was. It's not only evangelicals who don't listen well. That said, heathens aren't the ones trying to claim a God possesses us and makes us uniquely capable of good listening. And we're not using those skills to try to sell a product that nobody wants. Here's how to be a good listener out here in reality. This question shows up in Reddit a lot. Here's one 2023 thread's advice. Quote, let go of your own thoughts. Be genuinely curious about what the others are saying. There's a big difference between listening and just waiting to speak, and you're probably doing the latter. Unquote. Here's another thread with similar advice. Quote, my boss succeeded in business simply by waiting until the person was finished speaking, then thinking of the next thing to say. That's it. Just a few seconds of delay, and he suddenly became the greatest listener in all the lands. Be with. Instead of focusing on what you like or dislike about what someone's saying, just be with them. Don't worry about what comes next. Don't worry about your responses. Don't worry about having that great story about that one time you did something similar. Unquote. And perhaps most powerfully of all, advice from a Guardian article from 2016, quote, when a person wants to express their pain, your experiences aren't relevant to them. A similar common mistake is to leap to offer advice before being asked. Giving advice is not listening, and often it's not helpful, Pam adds. It shuts people down. If you feel a responsibility to fix your friend's problems, relinquish it. Unquote. Reminds me of that very old saying, the worst vice is advice. So we can get a good idea of listening as a full focus on the other person and their experiences, their thoughts. And evangelicals seem to know this too, to at least some extent. Their advice usually does center on that kind of focus. Here's something from Stephen Ministries, which appears to be some kind of advice site for future ministers. They offer this admonition, quote, deliberately set aside your instinct to share your own thoughts so you can focus on what the person in front of you is sharing, unquote. They continue with suggestions to be attentive, responsive, non-judgmental, trustworthy. Yeah, good luck with all of that. Evangelicals think they have to judge other people, because if they don't, they're condoning sin. The site Biblical Leadership offers its own exhortation, quote, let's be sure each of us takes the time to listen a little more slowly to the people with whom we interact. Let's slow our pace down a little, unquote. A great many advice sites tell stories from the Gospels about how Jesus listened to people. There's a 2019 Gospel Coalition post that's just entirely those stories. As well, we find those sorts of stories in a 1983 post from Desiring God. 1983, downright prehistoric. And here is one of the lessons that it offers. Quote, I put more emphasis on affirmation than on answers, unquote. And I would be supremely curious about just where Jesus did that, because he seemed to order people around and fix their problems all the time. Springboarding off that story about Jesus, she says she had to learn to resist the temptation to try to fix other people when she was trying to listen to them. In 2019, a Christian Coaches Network offered a guideline. Quote, in our coach training, we will usually hear this statement, you will have had a productive coaching session if your client talks 80% of the time and you only talk 20% of the time, unquote. Overall, though, you find a lot of doublespeak about listening. Tim Challies observes, good listening reflects our relationship with God. But then he also says, few of us are good listeners. Uh-oh, what's that say about their relationship with God? All of that advice frequently looks totally different in lived practice. Midwestern Seminary suggests that its readers, quote, interrupt intentionally and gently rather than habitually and rashly, unquote. They also advise that, quote, good listeners are willing to stop listening to something that is perverse, wicked, or dangerously foolish, unquote. When I read that post, I kept wondering, gosh, what complete blithering idiot wrote this? Well, it turned out to be Gavin Ortland. He's a hardline Southern Baptist. He popped up when we were talking about his atrocity apologetics around slavery. Yeah, he thinks there's a thing called biblical slavery that somehow wasn't real slavery. He also popped up in a recent post about the denomination's annual meeting. Yeah, he's a big-time complementarian, too. Who's shocked? I mentioned Grace Church's site a minute ago, and there we learn about an evangelical who meets a woman recovering from alcohol addiction. She says that she thinks Jesus could be God. The evangelical writes about the reply he immediately wants to give. Quote, my mind raced with different rebuttals to her statement about prayer and apologetic defenses for the supremacy of Christ. But my friend, the friend is a guy he converted who's about to get baptized. So he's a brand newbie Christian, remember. But my friend was unfazed. He smiled at her and said, I think that's great that you think he could be God. Because if you are ever going to believe that he is God, you have to start with acknowledging that he could be. I would just encourage you to find out if he is or not. Because if he is, that changes everything. I was floored. What a gracious, wise, kind, and Jesus-like answer. His responsive listening looked like the gospel, and mine didn't, unquote. But in reality, neither of these two Christians, not the experienced one and not the brand new convert, neither of them was really listening to her. And this is because evangelicals only really want to be good listeners for better sales. On the University of Washington website, we find definitions of the 4 listening types. Evangelicals fit into the third type, the evaluative listener. Quote, evaluative listener is already excited about what the speaker has to say, so much so that they already have data they wish to share, an alternate opinion they wish to refute, or an argument to be made as soon as you stop talking. You have their attention, but they're evaluating your every word and then crafting a response or rebuttal while you are still talking. Unquote. Evangelicals listen to evangelism targets to specifically better tailor the sales pitch. Evangelist Mike Frost specifically calls listening an evangelistic art in his posts. He even quotes Tim Keller, not realizing he's actually just told us Keller's actually a bad listener. See if you can spot how. Quote, as Tim Keller wrote, everybody has got a story. If you're able to inhabit that so well that people feel that you know their story better than they do, and then show in a compelling way how that story is only going to find resolution in Jesus, then they're going to find a compelling case for Christianity. Unquote. That's being a good listener? Is it now? On the Cru website, that's Campus Crusade for Christ, but then they realized that calling it a crusade was kind of problematic in the modern age. On their website, their writer specifically makes a connection between listening and evangelism. In the way that they think about listening, it only occurs to further evangelism goals. Quote, as you listen for barriers to the gospel that others have, listen for ignorance. They've just never heard, so they don't know. Misconceptions. They believe something about Christianity that's not true. Fear. They fear losing community, wealth, identity, security, pleasure, a secret, an addiction, etc. Pain. Trauma and other painful life events can cause people to distrust God and doubt God's goodness. Fruitless Christians. That's bad Christians, folks. No one wants to become like their unloving, self-righteous, angry, or unhappy friends. Unquote. And immediately after this list that they have offered, they give pointed, loaded questions to ask the target. It all reminds me of a quote from Rock and Rule, 1983 animated movie, highly suggest. Quote, enough about them. Let's talk about you. What did you think of my last album? Unquote. None of this is real communication. In fact, it's being done to avoid real communication. If the outcome is always gonna be making another sales pitch, that's not communication. And it ain't even like active listening can't be part of salesmanship. It can be part of great salesmanship. If the salesperson knows that the product might not be perfect for everyone, that sometimes they won't find an offer suited to that person, active listening can uncover the mismatch. It can end the sales engagement quickly and let the agent get on to somebody who might make a purchase. As one example, when I began working for a particular TV company, one perk of the job was getting their largest channel package for free. When I called my cable company to disconnect, the person taking the call conceded that she could not compete with free as a price. When she found out I was literally going to get everything that I was getting before and that I was getting local channels as well, she was like, okay, well, let's get this done. Thank you for using our service while you had it. You're welcome back anytime. In similar fashion, someone who needs to cancel cell phone service because they just don't get coverage at their home, that's not really something that an agent could save. But evangelicals can never concede that some people just aren't a fit for evangelical Christianity. They're taught that every human being on earth needs their faith system, so everyone needs the product that goes along with it, active membership in a church holding that faith. They can't allow for virtuous reasons to reject their product. Every rejection is invalid. Worse, evangelicals are only listening so they can tailor the sales pitch better. That's it. When they're ostensibly listening, they're not hearing deal breakers. They're hearing apologetics prompts and manipulation opportunities. They can't hear our real and often very painful reasons for leaving their religion if we've left. Instead, they sort of hear what we say and then parrot back, oh, okay, so you're mad Jesus didn't give you a pony. Or, oh, but you didn't really believe now, did ya? Yeah, their anti-process shields are like the Iron Dome, and they are operating at max power. I would just about rather evangelicals not even pretend to listen to us than to listen in such a deceitful way. There is one funny end note about listening that I want to share with you. It's not like evangelicals can't practice real listening. They can just only do it with targets that will never ever challenge their beliefs or get too close to real intimacy. And I found a Calvinist site that perfectly illustrated that truth. Yeah, Calvinists, of all people. Here are their 3 suggestions: consistency, patience, and seeking transformation. However, the context of listening here isn't evangelism. It's listening to Yahweh while you're in prayer. Yeah, Yahweh, the non-existent God, is perfectly safe as a listening target, because no matter how much Christians try to listen to him, their God will never tell them anything that directly challenges their own opinions. It's like that really intense scene from House MD after he gets shot, when he realizes he's been in a coma dream all along. In the scene, he walks into a clean room and asks his 3 assistant doctors, "How come you guys have never tried to yank me off this case? I'm having hallucinations, blackouts. Every time I've had an epiphany on this one, you guys were right on board. No challenges, no need to explain. No offense, but either you guys are getting smarter or I'm getting dumber." Chase says, "Well, we've just worked with you long enough to know." And Hal says, "The test results even before you entered the room? We have identical knowledge. How is that possible?" And House realizes right then it's not possible in the real world. If he's just imagining, dreaming the entire case, their uncharacteristic agreement with him and their knowledge of everything he knows, suddenly all that fits in place. It works. It makes perfect sense. Those 3 doctors are to House what Yahweh is to Christians who pray. They can't listen while allowing the possibility of their own transformation. They can't allow for the possibility that listening could, in the Calvinist site's words, quote, reorient us and transform our relationships, our character, and our engagement with the people and world around us, unquote. That's a kind of listening that they can only allow with targets that aren't real people. When it comes to real people, evangelicals like that Gavin Ortland guy earlier, they have to redefine poor listening as great listening, actually. No wonder the flocks can't truly listen, and no wonder their evangelism falls so flat on the rare occasions that they try it. If we wanted fake communication done for better sales, we could get that just about anywhere. Real listening, though, that brings people closer. It doesn't drive people apart. And maybe that, in the end, is why evangelicals are so singularly bad at it. Thank you so much for listening. Next up, speaking of listening, Alpha Course 14 teaches viewers how to do personal evangelism. Until then, this is Captain Cassidy signing off. Hope you all have a marvelous midweek, and we'll see you soon.